Throughout all of 2025, I've been working on reading books by authors I own multiple books by, but I've never tried before, just because I wanted to see if it's worth keeping all those books on my shelves, whether it's 2 or whether it's 5 books, and just give the author a little taste test. So I started off this year by really wanting to give the whole book a try, but when I set the goal, I had about 30 authors on my shelves I hadn't tried from before. So throughout the year, that's what I was aiming for. Well, as I bought more books, as people gifted me books, as I discovered new authors, I found that I actually had much more than just 30. It was actually closer to like 40 or 45 authors that I had on my shelves that I hadn't tried from before, but I owned multiple books by them. Some of those came from gifts of series that my friend lent me. Some of them came from books that I had acquired the second book in a series very cheaply, and so now I own multiple books in the series. Various reasons. So I have the 30 authors that I wanted to read from on my TBR, and I was like, what do I do with all these extras? Because it felt like I was meeting the numbers of the goal, but the spirit of the goal was to really test out every author that I own multiple books by that I haven't read. So I was like, in order to keep with the spirit of the goal, I'm going to do like a taste test of all these authors by just reading a little bit, double checking, like, is this book the book I want to read? And most of them are starts to fantasy series. There's a couple standalones in there, but not many. And so I just wanted to, instead of starting 15 new series, just read a chapter, do some research if I need to look up a bit more about the series, and then go from there. So I have tried 3 books, and I'm going to tell you about them right now because I'm eager to get the ones back on my shelves that I've been working on, and then I'll just come back with you when I have a few more that I've tried. So the first one is a very new addition to my shelves, and that's Paul Auster's Oracle Night. This is a book about a man who has like a near fatal illness. One day he wanders into a like stationery shop and buys the Blue Notebook, and then something happens and he's like under the spell of this Blue Notebook for 9 days. And we'll just go from there to find out what happened. So this one I don't believe has actual chapters. Though it's very small, but it's quite tiny print. I read roughly 3 pages because I was like, it's such a short book. It's like 200 pages. I don't need to read like 20 pages or 10% of it to figure out if I liked it. Those 3 pages were really good. So some things that I liked were the quality of the writing. It's written very well. I feel like I was inside the head of this character very quickly. There was description, but it didn't seem overly descriptive, and the description that was in there wasn't boring. It was interesting. And the plot was also moving very quickly. So by the 3rd page, we had also entered what I believe will be the stationery shop that he gets this notebook from. So after reading just those few pages, I was like, I definitely am interested in this author and his writing. I own another book by him that is much bigger that like I have no idea, because this one I think is almost 1,000 pages. Yeah, it's 950 pages. I have no idea if I will ever get to this one, but this tiny one I definitely will get to and try, and then maybe it'll give me confidence to like try this one. So this one's going to be a keep. The next one that I checked out is a fantasy series, and that is Rhapsody by Elizabeth Hayden. This one is just a, sort of classic 1999 fantasy story. This is a very long series. It's about 7 or 8 books, I believe. And after reading the first chapter, which I think was kind of like a prologue, it took a couple pages to get there. I read maybe 5 pages in total. And then I was like, oh, I want to see how long the series is. So I looked it up and then was like, while I'm here, I want to see what the ratings of the final book are, because most of the time, if a series ends well, the later it goes in the series, the higher the rating should be. Because if I don't like this book, I'm not going to continue on. So the farther it goes, the more people who have enjoyed it have kind of continued on this journey. And the rating for the final book was really poor. And a lot of people were like, this is not good. So then I was like, okay, let me go read some reviews of this one. And I think there are going to be things in this one that I just really don't like. So one of the things that I think I won't like is that the main character, Rhapsody, is supposed to be so, like, supernaturally beautiful that, like, she causes wagon crashes everywhere she goes because men, like, can't keep their eyes off her. And a lot of people said that one of her main characteristics is her looks in a way that felt very not forward thinking. It wasn't like the author was doing something with it. It's just, this woman is so beautiful. But the woman, like, doesn't know she's beautiful, so she can't, like, use that to her advantage. So I was like, I think this is one of those, like, older fantasies. While, yes, it is written by a woman, it still has a lot of misogyny built into it, because the fantasy genre has a lot of misogyny in its past and present sometimes. So I think this is one of those that I was like, I'm good passing on it. And I've collected the first 2 in the series, so luckily I didn't collect all 7. And I'm going to pass on this series. I think it'll be better if I just let that one go. I don't think I'll have a good time with it. Now, the next series is one that I have heard does not have the best women characters. So, like, why am I trying to read it? I don't know. I just want to know what it's all about. And that's The Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. I read the prologue, which was 7 pages. I read, like, the first couple sentences of chapter 1, and I was like, yeah, I want to give this book a try. I don't know, there's something about, like, I forget how many books this is, 12, 14, however many books this is. There's something about that really long series that does draw me in. And I've heard from so many people that the middle books are really slow and boring. Some people love all the books and are like, I don't know what you're talking about. They're all good. So what I was thinking when I was reading this one is that, yeah, I do want to give it a try, even if it's going to be really slow. I was like, maybe this is a series where I just try to read 30 pages a day in the series and just read it as long as it takes, something like that, to, like, get me through. Because these are long. I mean, this is 800 pages, and I don't know, I think there are books that are longer than this one in the series. So I would like to give this one a try. I own the first 2 in the series. I haven't collected any more because I do think there's a strong chance that I will not like it. But I do just kind of want to know about this series. I would love to read the books that Sanderson wrote because I am a big Sanderson fan. So we'll see if I get to the ending or not. But definitely this first one, I was like, the writing was good. I enjoyed Robert Jordan's writing. I thought it flowed very well. I thought it was intriguing what he was writing. So I definitely want to continue. So those are the 3 books I've tried so far. I have a giant stack still waiting for me, and so I'll come back when I have a few more that I've tried and want to tell you about, and I'm going to go actually put these books on the shelves as ones I want to read. Hello, I'm back with 3 more books that I've made a decision on. So I started with Duncton Wood by William Horwood. This is one I thought I was going to keep, even though it's extremely long. This book is 700 pages. Very long, but I liked the first chapter well enough. It was pretty short. It was only 11 pages long. This is about a mole who doesn't like living underground. He kind of wants to live above the ground. He enjoys the sunshine. And there's lots of, like, nature writing. So the first chapter was super descriptive, which If the book is going to be super descriptive all the way through, I'm not sure how much I'll be into that. But if there is like action and dialogue kind of mixed in well enough, I think I'll like it. I think it's an intriguing idea, kind of like an adult Redwall. That's one of the reasons I picked this up, is just to see if it's interesting. And I just hope we find fun characters in here and that I can have like a good time with it. So I am going to keep this one. The next one that I picked up was The Charmed Sphere by Catherine Azzaro. This is the first in a series, and I kind of heard that it's a, you know, kind of like a romantic fantasy, probably fantasy romance before that was considered a genre. I was really excited for this one because I love the cover. I think it's so cool. It sounds interesting, like someone being a young girl being a really powerful mage, and the story kind of like would go on from there. However, when I first read this one, I didn't really like the writing style. I read a chapter. It was 7 pages long, and I just really didn't get along with the writing. I found this to be a little bit blah in the way the story was being told. It's kind of about this girl who knows magic but doesn't want to be taken away to be like taught magic. And so she's hiding from the king's people that are there to gather up people who know magic and take them away to teach them. And so she's hiding out, and it's kind of like, I don't know, just something about the writing felt awkward, I guess. Like, I don't think there were any sentences that I could point to and say, like, this is what I don't like. It's just a general flow of page to page. As I'm reading, everything just felt a little stilted, a little awkward. And I was just like, I don't think this is going to be something I like reading. I think I was going to get bored of it rather quickly. So I decided to go ahead and pass this one along with, this is like the 4th book in the series that I found at Goodwill, I think, at one point, and I picked it up because I thought I was going to like this, and I need to stop doing that. So I'm going to pass these along to someone who will hopefully like them. And then the final one I picked for this section was The Bone Dolls Twin by Lynn Llewellyn, and this is going to be another keep. So this one was really interesting. It's about a wizard woman who is super old. She's like 230 years old, and it's talking about how she has this bowl that like has some like very dark magic attached with it, and she's kind of the guardian of it, and she's going to talk to an oracle to figure out more about what this bowl is, I guess. And she has like a young apprentice who she's kind of teaching about how to be guardian of this bowl, so that if she dies or when she gets too old, he can take over guardianship of it. I didn't even read the first full chapter of this one. I read maybe the first 10 pages, and I was into it. I like the writing. I do think it had like a lot of world building smashed into a very small section, so it's kind of a lot, but I think that it did a better job of like throwing in some interesting things to keep me reading, even while it was kind of dumping a lot of information on me. I'm like, okay, I don't really understand all of that that's going on, but I am interested in this bowl and in like the sorcery. So I really like fantasy stories with a lot of magic, where magic is very prominent, and so I'm hoping that this one will be it. So we're gonna add these back onto my shelves, and I'm definitely like really feeling excited for this one. This one is not super high priority, but I am interested to get to it when I'm in the mood for this type of read. Okay, so I finished reading all the other chapters, or at least parts of a chapter. So I'm going to take you through all the 12 books that I have left. I'm going to kind of try to go from like least interested to most interested, and Sick is here for moral support. So out of all the ones that I had left, I only have one that I'm going to be getting rid of without reading it. And that's Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This writing just felt quite dry to me. I really struggled to kind of get into it, and I think after having read the first chapter and not liking it as much as I did, well, I didn't read the first chapter. I read like 8 pages or something like that. I would never pick this up again, I don't think. I would definitely be like avoiding it on my shelves. So I'm going to give this one away. And I think I'm also going to pass on 100 Years of Solitude because I think the writing will probably be very similar. And I just don't think that it was going to work well for me. I couldn't even pinpoint why. The topic wasn't that bad, but it's just, as I was reading like pages, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be like getting out of it, what I'm supposed to be taking away from it. And yeah, it just felt kind of dry. I don't know, I wasn't getting much out of what I was reading. The next one we have is really unfortunate because I've heard such great things about it, but the first parts that I read of it did nothing for me, and that was The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. I don't think I'm going to DNF this. I'm going to put it back on my shelves, but in the future, I may DNF this. I may decide to take it off my list because this is about a boy, Merlin, because this is a King Arthur retelling, focusing mainly on Merlin. And this is about him as a child, or at least the beginning of this is about him as a child. And how he's maybe like the bastard son of a demon, maybe, or something like that. And there's some men that are there talking about him, and Merlin ends up kind of attaching onto this one older guy who's there and kind of following him along, and it hints that like maybe that's gonna do something in his life, but I don't know, just the writing and the subject matter just really did not inspire me to want to continue. And I think I would give this like another chapter, maybe 2, before like fully DNFing it. But I don't know, I just really struggled to find anything interesting in this one. The next one I read was this absolutely chunky book, The First Binding by R.R. Veardy. I've heard this book is almost a retelling of The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and I definitely could see that from the beginning. We're setting up this character who is a bard slash storyteller. He enters into a tavern, and it's sort of setting up that he is this interesting magical storyteller that people have heard about, and it's definitely like setting up the story to then have him go back and tell how he came to be who he was, which is kind of the setup for Name of the Wind. The reason this one is so low on the list for me is because of the writing being very purple in a way that did not add to the story. So I read maybe the first 6 pages. These pages are pretty dense, like tiny print in an 800-page book. So there's a lot of words to each page. And I don't know, there were just some things that like actively made me go, does that make sense? It was talking about how this storyteller is adding like stillness to the bar in a way that doesn't make sense, or the tavern that he's in. So he said, I eyed the barkeeper, adding another layer of stillness to the place. The air thickened into something chewable as I let curiosity flood the elderly men sitting in the far corner. And I don't know, I just couldn't feel or envision like the air was becoming chewable as he let curiosity flood the men. Like, was curiosity flooding their minds, or was it like his own curiosity was like he was curious about the men? Like, I don't know, it just felt confusing in a way that made me go like, wait, what's happening? Rather than like adding to the story, it was taking away from it, because I'm like, that's a weird way to say that. I'm not quite sure what you mean. And I think when you're trying to be very lyrical, you have to know how every word comes across to the reader. and you can't let them stumble on things like that. I think that was the only time that I really like stumbled over something that bad, but there's just a lot going on, but there's just a lot of time spent in here on not a lot happening. It's basically this man sitting at a bar and drawing everyone's attention and then telling them like, hey, you need to go bring me an audience and I'll tell you a story, and then him talking to the bartender. And that's like the first 6 or so pages, 8 pages. And I don't know, it was one of those where I'm like, okay, I already feel like it has a little ding against it for everyone who says it like super closely follows Name of the Wind. That doesn't interest me. I want to read your own story. And then the prose feeling very purple. I believe this is not the author's first series, but it is his first epic fantasy. And part of me wonders, like, okay, maybe in, 10 or 15 years, you'd be able to, like, write in this very purple writing. But I don't know. It just didn't feel like it was adding to the story in this one. So I'm not sure if I'll ever get around to this one. It's so big, and I just don't know if I liked it all that much. We'll see. I'm definitely not getting rid of it, but I am going to do some more research into, like, reviews to see what people like and dislike about it, and I may return to it in the future. But it's also, like, only the first 2 books have been written, and he takes a long time to write these books. I have no idea how many books are going to be in the series, and so I have a hard time with those kinds of books where it's like, you really don't know how long you're going to be waiting, and you don't know how long the series is supposed to be, and so you're just kind of stuck in this, like, limbo of, like, is it going to get finished? And I mean, I've read The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear, so, like, I get waiting on a series is not necessarily new to me, but I also knew when I started that series what I was getting into and that we probably wouldn't have the second book. I read it so I could talk to my husband about it because he had read them and I hadn't. So, yeah, I'm just not sure about that one. Then we had Janny Wurts, The Curse of the Mist Wraith. This is a very long fantasy series. I want to say like 12 books that are all pretty chunky. This one itself is like 800 pages, though, like, the text isn't like too tiny. So I don't know, it may not be actually as long to read as I think it would be. So I read, I don't know, like 10 pages of this one. And the writing was not bad about this one, but there was a little bit of info dumping, which was frustrating. And it made it hard to realize, like, what's actually going on. But I will say the info dumping was balanced a little by some action going on. So it was like, I was a little bit confused and a little bit intrigued all at once. This opens on a ship with a crew rescuing some people that they had, like, attacked their ship. And now they're, like, gathering prisoners from the people who are still alive. And they find out that one of them is like some sort of like crazy strong wizard or something, and so they're like all nervous about having captured him, but also really excited because it probably means a big reward. And I don't know, that it was a little info dumpy, but I was also kind of intrigued at it, and I liked the writing well enough. It wasn't like bad. It just wasn't one that I was like, oh, this is really good, I want to read more like right now. So definitely not bad, but I would be excited to see where this goes. I own like 5 or 6 of these books because I don't see them often at like used bookstores. So when I do find them, I try to grab them. And I believe that Janny Wurts has just recently finished the series, written the final book, which is kind of cool. And so I'd like to read this one. We'll see how it goes. And then I think this was the last one that I was a little iffy on, which was a new book that I got last year for Christmas. This is Deathless by Peter Newman. I guess I shouldn't say this is a new book. This was written in 2019, 2018 for the hardback. So this one is about a family called House Sapphire. This is a family that can kind of reincarnate themselves, and they are having to do what is called the hunt, and we don't really know what it is. We know it's some sort of ritual that allows humans, I think, to survive in this land that they're in control of, and kind of beats back whatever enemy they're working against. And in the first section, we just meet who I'm assuming is our main character, who's like an heir to House Sapphire, and he's getting ready to go out on the hunt, and we're finding out that the hunts have not been very successful in the past, and they don't really know why. So, I don't know, it was interesting. I don't think the writing was, like, great. Again, it was just one of those where, like, it just wasn't drawing me in. Like, what was happening in the story wasn't making me want to read more, per se, but it wasn't, like, making me want to shut the book and never read it again. So, I'm still very intrigued by the story and this, like, reincarnation and what is the hunt. I love a good, like, ritual kind of story. So I definitely am interested in this one, but my expectations have been a little tempered. Okay, this one is one I was excited by. The Thief's Gamble by Juliet E. McKenna. This is about a thief, I believe. Yes, a thief. And at the beginning of the story, it opens with this, like, little section from Wealth and Wisdom, A Gentleman's Guide to Their Acquisition and Keeping. And it was just talking about, like, gambling and how to be, like, a gentlemanly gambler. And I really liked that. It was just, like, a page of that. And then we jumped into the story of our main character. Her name is Levac. And she's in disguise, and she's supposed to be meeting up with a partner, pulling some kind of job or something, and her partner's not showing up, and she's kind of like questioning, what do I do in this moment? And I really liked the writing in this one, and I think the story was kind of jumping in a way that was making me excited. Like, what are you doing? What's this job? Who's the partner that you're waiting for? Like, lots to kind of chew on and be excited by. So this one was definitely one that I was interested in. Another one that caught my attention quite a bit was Lois McMaster Bujold's The Curse of Chalian. This is the first book in the Five Gods series. I forget what the series title is called. So this story opens up with a man, Kazaril, who is very broken down. Something has happened. He's been in, like, war or something, and he's just a very downtrodden man, both, like, emotionally and physically. And he ends up on his way to wherever it is he's going. He did say where he was going, but I forget where. He was going to a certain place, and on his way there, he stumbles across a mill, and there was, like, a little ritual that had happened there, and there's a man laying there dead. And yeah, I liked the writing of this. I felt like very early on we could just catch on to who Kazaril kind of was. Like, we don't know his whole backstory or anything yet, but we could just kind of tell this is a man who's seen some things and is not really doing great. And I just liked how quickly I felt like I was in with him. Like, it's like, okay, I know kind of who you are, and now I'm interested to see where it is we're going to go together. So I really liked the character work so far in this, so I was excited about that one. Another one that I liked the character work in was Innocent Mage by Karen Miller. This is in I believe it's a duology, Kingmaker, Kingbreaker. This is the first book, and this is about a young boy who is a fisherman who is, I think, the second or third son of his father. So he wants to create a better life. Fishing is a very hard life. His dad is growing older, getting ready to pass on the business. And our boy, Asher, he decides that he's going to go to the city and try to make a better living for himself. So this first chapter was about him sneaking out of the house so his dad doesn't know and try to stop him, or his brothers try to come get him. He basically enlists his friend to help him, and he's sneaking off to the big city where I'm sure he's going to get embroiled in some kind of crazy plot. But yeah, this is really fun. I like that idea of, like, a young kid off to like make a better life for themselves. I think that's like an interesting kind of character to follow, and we're kind of gonna get this like fish out of water feeling because he's used to living in a small town on the coast and he's going into this like desert city, it sounds like, or at least less nice and coastal and more like hot deserty like city. And the back says there's something about like ancient magic, which sounds really cool. So I was definitely like intrigued by reading more in this one, and I liked the writing well enough. And then we're down to the last 4, and it's funny because these are 2 of them are very big names in fantasy, and then 2 are less well known but still really, really great openings to these books. So let's talk about the 2 really big fantasy names. The first one we have is Ramin Hobb, the Assassin's Apprentice. This is the first in the Farseer trilogy, the first in the Realm of the Elderlings. And after reading this, I was like, I gotta get to Realm of the Elderlings next year, which is so funny because when I read Wheel of Time, I was like, I have to do Wheel of Time next year, and there's no way I'm doing both. They're so chunky and such a long series. I can't do both all at the same time. So I gotta figure out what I'm doing. But this is really good. I really liked the writing. So I didn't read the whole first chapter, I don't think. I read maybe like 10 pages, and it's just about a 6-year-old boy who is sort of being fobbed off like some, I guess, lord or something has had a child out of wedlock, and the man who's Fitz's mom, whatever man is like lording over her, is kind of like, I don't want to have to take care of your son. I already have to take care of you. No one wants to marry you anymore. So I'm getting rid of your son. Who is the father? And she says, you know, this is the father. So he's like dumping off Fitz at the father's house. I really liked the narrative voice in here for the characters. Like the way they spoke felt very real. Like you could almost picture a character in your mind speaking that way. So I really enjoyed that aspect of this book, and I was just, you know, a little bit intrigued. I've heard so many good things about this series. It's hard to not have my expectations like so sky high, but I do think that some people have had problems with some of her books, and I don't think I'm going to have that problem. We'll see, but I really liked the writing, and often if I just like the writing enough, we can get through, you know, maybe a less exciting plot. I've heard that some of the Realm of the Elderlings books are very character focused, so if you like the characters, you'll like them. And I think just seeing what her writing capabilities were, I can see her being a strong writer who can write really good characters, since she's able to do so much with just like character voice. So next year, maybe? I do have plans for doing like a whole Realm of the Elderlings like spoiler vlogs, because I've seen tons of people do like non-spoiler vlogs for them, and I kind of want to just do spoilers so that people who have read the books can like watch and enjoy them, because I feel like I'm the last person on earth to have started them, which is not true, but it feels that way. And then the other big name that I tried a chapter of was Joe Abercrombie, reading The Blade Itself, the first in the First Law trilogy. This is another book in a longer series. I really liked this first chapter. Opened with a lot of action and a lot of being in the character's like head, like him thinking through the action. So I'm not here to say it was the most exciting chapter, but it definitely wasn't the most boring chapter. And I just think that the voice was good. The writing was interesting. I was a little confused at some points, but I'm sure we'll get clued into what was actually happening like later on in the story. It was just a little bit of like he was referring to like creatures or people called flatheads, and I was like, I don't really know what flatheads are, but I'm sure you'll tell me later what they are. I liked it. It was melancholy, and I've heard this can be very melancholy, and I definitely felt that. But this made me more excited to read it. Some of these like big series that I hear so much about, I get so intimidated by them, but once you crack the spine and you're like in it a little bit, it just becomes so much less intimidating. It's like, oh, this is just a good story. Like, it's not a super complicated thing to get into. It's just a fantasy book. The next one that I read and really loved is by KJ Parker. I tried the first chapter of The Folding Knife. And this one is about a man who is a banker, I think, or he's like involved in the higher ups of a city and country. And he basically is like setting out to be all for himself. Like, he wants to make his own life better, and through those means makes everyone else's lives better, I've heard is kind of what it's about. The first chapter was very interesting. So we got like a little teeny little prologue that says like 40 years later. It was like 2 pages. And something that I loved in it is we were introduced to a folding knife. And so like immediately, because the book is called The Folding Knife, you're like immediately tuned in to like, what is this knife about? And it's about Basso, I'm assuming, losing the knife 40 years later from whatever happens. And that's kind of where we end in this first section, is like 40 years later. It talks about that, and then it talks about some murders that he may have committed or he may have stumbled into. I don't know, all within 3 pages. I read those 3 pages and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read this book. And so I just liked how immediately it was like, something's important with the folding knife. I feel like we were drawn into the character pretty well because of his like inner dialogue. I felt like I was starting to get an idea of like what he was like. And I don't know, just within 3 pages, I was like, I want to know what happened before all this. Like, it's pretty wild. So, wild 3 pages. And then the final book that I read a chapter of, and probably the chapter I liked the most, was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I had originally like thought I wasn't going to read this trilogy at all because I heard like not so good things about the second book. Maybe the third book was okay, but I heard that this book was like amazing, and then everything else was a letdown. So I'd kind of been like, well, I just won't read it. And then my friend read it and he was like, here, do you want the trilogy? I'm done with it now. And I was like, okay, like, I'll check it out. And I read this first chapter and I was like, it's really good. So it's about this young boy whose mom is performing this like horrific ritual on her little boy, like carving like these images of a crow. Like on his back, she's like carving out crow wings, and on his like throat and chest, she's carving out like the head and the beak. And there's something about like the crow god, there's like an eclipse, and it's like the idea is it's like the crow god eating the sun and he's in power. And I think this series, like the magic system, is about characters sort of being able to take on powers of the gods, or let the gods like live in them and act through them, or something like that. And the first chapter was like so intense, I didn't want to stop reading. I was like, what is this? It's kind of horrific, but it's so interesting and I want to know what's going to happen next. This book, for some reason, has like really large text, like a YA or a middle grade. So like it's not even very chunky. This is like a 450 page book, but I would assume it'd probably be like, I don't know, 1/3 of or 2/3 of that size if it wasn't written in such large font. But I'm not complaining. The font is easy on the eyes. So yeah, I just, out of all the ones I read, I think this one and The Wheel of Time was like my favorites. They were really good. I also really liked The Folding Knife, and some of the other ones that I read I enjoyed, but they weren't like gripping. Those two were, and The Wheel of Time were super gripping and made me like really eager to read some of these books. So that's kind of the end of this little taste test of all the books who I own multiple books by, but I hadn't read before. It feels weird having like taste tested all of them. I'm like, okay, I know I like them at least a little bit now. I do need to actually like read these books because the first chapter being good does not always mean the rest of the book is good. It's just, you know, that first little taste. And sometimes a first chapter has been workshopped a lot and the rest of the book hasn't, and it kind of lets you down. But I'm really excited about so many of these, and it just feels nice to be like, yes, I am interested in them, to get a little taste of what the story is about. So when I'm in the mood for something, I can kind of pick it up and read it. And I did weed out like a couple things that I knew I wasn't interested in, which is good. Just always trying to sift through the books and make sure that the best books are the ones that I'm aiming for. And so I think these are all ones that, with the exception of like The Crystal Cave and The First Binding, that I need to read a little bit more to see. I think most of them will be books that should be like 3 stars and above in theory. So it feels pretty good. And now I'm so tired of reading first chapters. I need to go read a book that I'm in the middle of and not reading any more starts to books. I need to finish some things, and then we can start some books and actually finish them. I would love to know how far into a book you feel like you need to get like a pretty good taste test for an author's writing style. For me, I felt like it was between, 5 to 10 pages. Some of them I read a little further, but 5 to 10 pages is usually where I know if I'm going to be like sinking into the story, or if I'm kind of like floundering a bit, or just really not liking it, or having a hard time paying attention to it. So I'd be really interested to know how long it takes for you to feel like you can get like a bit of a feel for whether or not you might like a book. That would be really interesting to talk about. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. I may do something like this again in 2026 because I do have some goals for 2026 that might need to have this kind of thing happen again, but we'll see. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.